Hi friends! When we hear about charity, we immediately associate with successful businessmen or media personalities. However, this isn't always the case. The most generous and sincere people who are always ready to help those in need turn out to be ordinary people with a big heart. They confirm the expression, "The world is not without good people." But more often their actions remain unnoticed. Very few people have heard about the hero of today's story, although he spent his life unselfishly caring for those in need. And yet this man is considered a true hero in Kazan. Even in his lifetime, he was awarded a monument under the walls of the local Kremlin. Here's why. Asgard Klemzhinov was born in 1936 in a small village in a simple peasant family. Since childhood, Asgard got used to work, looked after cattle, learned together with his parents to make and kill bricks for sale, and of course to farm work. Here we must give credit to his father because he put into the boy's heart principles to which he'll be faithful throughout his life. Help those in need, do not pass by someone else's misfortune, and never ask anything in return for help. As with everyone, after World War II, the boy's life became more difficult because his father returned from the military front without both legs, and the responsibilities for the household fell on 9-year-old Asgard. In addition, the family often starved, and meals such as nettle soup were the only available option. Though it was such hardships that only strengthened this lad's character. After finishing school, Asgard, like most other boys, went to the army. On his return, he decided to try his luck in a bigger town where there were many hopes and opportunities. That's how the roads brought our hero to Kazan, where he got his first job, which immediately turned out to be a noble one. As the young man went to work for the police, he took his job very seriously and showed great compassion for people. That's why Asgard didn't take drunkards to a sobering up center, but directly to their homes. The sobering up system seemed inhumane to him. However, when his bosses found out about such an ability of an employee, they naturally fired the failed policeman. Deprived of his earnings, Asgard was forced to take various part-time jobs until the 70s. He found a job at a local grocery market where he worked for many decades. His main job was to carry goods around the market on a horse-drawn cart. Skipping ahead, it's with his cart that Asgard was depicted on a monument under the Kremlin wall. Our village boy, who grew up with the consciousness that nothing should be wasted, was quick to notice how much food and waste was simply being thrown away and not going to any useful purpose. It was a strange observation, but it was this observation that made the simple carriage driver famous. Cleverness and industriousness prompted us to get to pigs and start fatting them up without actual free fodder. However, in those days, you could not just start at such a farm without permission. What do you think Asgard did? With great desire, Asgard set up an underground pixie in a barn, thereby setting up an underground farm. He thought over the mechanisms of feeding and manure removal, ran water and electricity, and every day he smuggled the waste from the market to the barn where he fed his piglets. He acted with extreme caution, as no one was to find out that there were animals living under the barn. Underground farming has to be confined with official work, so Asgard got up at 3 a.m. and removed the manure at night. Thanks to cleanliness, he was able to leave his farm unnoticed for 6 years. Thanks to the government, began to bring in good money, but the young man simply didn't know what to do with it, as he never dreamt of becoming rich and was used to being satisfied with very little. He remembered his father's words that if there was an extra penny, it was better to give it to the elderly or to the needy. At first, Asgard put his savings instead of the money box into the bowl under the bed, but after a while he decided to do charity work. In those years, the state was taking all the care of the needy, and let's be honest, it wasn't very successful. So Asgard came to the yard of Kazan Orphanage, number 1, with a cart full of food which ordinary families cannot afford. Needless to say how happy the staff and children were to see such a guest, feeling that such sudden gifts were much needed by the poor children. Asgard has been trying to visit the children as often as possible ever since. As soon as they saw his silhouette in the windows, they immediately ran out into the courtyard, screaming with happiness and begging the kind uncle to take them for a horse ride. This was the biggest reward for Asgard's kindness, visiting the children regularly. One winter, he noticed that the children were running around in thin jackets in the frost. Within a month, he'd brought back a dozen natural fur coats on horseback. Time has passed, but the orphanage grounds still bear the signs of the nobleman's presence, such as the blue spruces and Orphanage's Dreams Come True, a monument to a child called Fairy Tale. Every year, the scale of gifts increased once us get presented a new Neva car to the management. But it was not the limit of kindness. Soon the orphanage got its own bus so that the children could go on excursions. It was bought, as always, with money from the illegal farm. The activities of our noble hero were not limited to his native land, and soon he was helping the whole Soviet Union. Only nowadays stands of charitable persons and orphanages are replete with names, but at that time Asgard was the only oddball who did good for nothing. Asgard helped not only orphans but also victims of Chernobyl, victims of earthquake in Armenia and avalanches in Georgia, and later to relatives of the victims of Vico, submarine and hostages in South Australia. Do you think the state had discovered Asgard's illegal activities? Unfortunately, yes, and they were even about to institute criminal proceedings for illegal business. However, justice returned to Asgard and all citizens of Kazan stood up for him, after which there was a considerable resonance and the case was closed and he was allowed to carry out his activities. You're probably wondering, how did the man who was constantly helping everyone around him actually live? You'd be surprised. But he gave his two-room flat in the center of the city to strangers when he accidentally found out that they were squatting in a communal flat shared by 8 people. He himself moved into a wooden barrack where he lived for the rest of his life, and he died in 2016. The happiest man in the world throughout his life, Asgard Glizminov, remained a modest man and never demanded recognition or gratitude for what he had done. He was sincerely happy to communicate with people, invite them to visit him, but he never considered the actions he performed to be an exploit. However, the state and big charity organizations thought otherwise and honored Asgard with dozens of honorable awards. Although it's difficult not to mention that none of these awards compared to the national respect Kazan residents have for the honored resident. It was not only the staff of orphanages, boarding schools, and old people's homes, but also top officials of the Republic pay tribute to the great man. The memory of Asgard's noble deed, who became a legend of a city, is engraved in the form of a monument in a carriage driver holding the bridles of a horse and looking at the big cart on which children are seated. It appears near the walls of the Kazan Kremlin in 2008 from personal funds of the first president of the Republic of Tatarstan, Mintimer Shivev. It's amazing how an ordinary native of the village could become famous for simple human kindness and not having a penny to his name, be the happiest man thanks to whom whole generations of successful people have grown up. There's no doubt that every one of them remembers Grandpa Asgard with warmth, as we know. As long as we remember people, they're still alive. All in all, the illegal farmer who raised cattle in his barn donated more than 80 passenger buses and passenger cars to orphanages in the Soviet Union and Russia during his lifetime. And the amount of money he spent on starving children and poor people is, by most conservative measures, over $3 million. Just think about those numbers. He was always moderately dressed. One might even say poorly. A jacket or vest frayed at the elbows. He was seen in the same clothes for several years at a time. Of course, people thought he was an oddball, but he stopped all questions in an instant. He used to say, "I keep money for the development of the farm, but if there is extra, why not give it to those who need it?" This is what the doctor defectologist of Kazan Orphanage, number 1, said about this incredible man. He lived the way he wanted to live and did what he was able to do. He had the opportunity to change his life abruptly, but he decided to change the lives of thousands of people for the better, while still being a simple uncle. Asgard, who walks around in an old jacket and is always ready to help people. Something tells me that somewhere in heaven, if there is anything, a special place has been prepared for him.